you, Senator Klobuchar, for your kindness in introducing me today. We're very proud of Amy in Minnesota, and from what I can understand, the nation shares that pride today. And I am honored that she would be present for me at the commencement of this hearing. Mr. Chairman, I'm very grateful to the committee for conducting these hearings on the need to reform the rules to protect debate and deliberation, so central to the unique role of the U.S. Senate, while removing flaws in the procedures that experience has proven fuel obstruction and paralysis. Perhaps I was asked to testify because of my involvement in the successful bipartisan battle to reform Rule 22 in the 94th Congress, where we reduced the number of members required to invoke cloture from 67 to 60. At about the same time, led by Senator Byrd, we changed the post-closure rules so that at a time certain following cloture, they would have to vote on the underlying measure, because that we were developing at that time a post-cloture filibuster technique, which led to endless delay. My co-sponsor, Jim Pierce from Kansas, a Republican, and I called up our proposal at the very opening of Congress. Our strategy was based on the constitutional right of the Senate to propound its own rules by a majority vote. Vice President Rockefeller, ruling from the chair, supported our position. The majority leader, Mike Mansfield, a wonderful human being and leader, appealed the chair's initial ruling, which we then successfully moved to table. In that long and sometimes bitter fight, I think we were on the floor for a month or more, lasting, the Senate on 3 separate occasions voted to sustain the constitutional option, the principle that a majority vote could change the rules. After the sense of the Senate became clear, Mike Mansfield and Bob Byrd, also with Russell Long, working with the Republican leadership, reached the negotiated compromise that I just outlined. And those are basically the rules that govern the Senate today. As we completed that process, an argument occurred about whether the Senate, in reaching the compromise rules, erased the effect of the motions to table that I've referred to earlier. I think Senator Cranston said it best when he said, upholding the Mansfield point of order only adds one tree to a jungle of precedents we reside in. But above and beyond that jungle stands the Constitution, and no precedent can reverse the fact that the Constitution supersedes the rules of the Senate, that the constitutional right to make its rules cannot be challenged. At about the same time, Senator Byrd, who was the key leader in these rules reforms, said that at any time that 51 senators are determined to change the rule and have a friendly presiding officer, and if the leadership joins them, that rule can be changed and senators can be faced with majority closures. That constitutional precedent remains today. Some argue that the rules themselves require a 2/3 vote for any amendment, but as I said earlier, I think the Constitution answers that question. We took that bold step in 1975 to reduce the cloture requirement because we had become paralyzed. We were in a ditch in the Senate, and many of us saw an abuse of the rules. Jim Allen of Alabama was a rules wizard. He had a coterie of allies who began the march toward what we see today, the use of cloture to paralyze the Senate, preventing it from acting on any issue that a motivated minority might seek to block. The constitutional remedy was invoked by majority rule, and the compromise was adopted by a large bipartisan vote. While the circumstances then differ in detail from what you confront today, fundamentally what we see now is a logical extension of the paralysis we faced then. The Senate, in fact, has evolved into a supermajority legislative body. The ever-present threat of filibuster has greatly enhanced the ability of a single senator, simply through a hold on a nominee or a measure, to prevent any consideration and to do so secretly. Many members of the Senate have said that this body is in crisis. Many scholars have said that the crisis is more severe than it has ever been before. I am heartened, particularly among newer members of the Senate, and I hope in the Senate at large, that there's a growing demand for rules reform. And I hope these rules will be ready for adoption at least by the beginning of the next session. Let me just mention two suggestions that I have. One, weaken the power of holds by making a motion to proceed either non-debatable or debatable for a limited number of time, say 2 hours. This change has been suggested many times over the years, but today's Senate demonstrates how badly it is needed. The rules should provide that the consideration of any nominee or the debate on any measure can begin by a traditional motion to proceed requiring only a majority vote. Secondly, I would hope that the joint leadership could shape a reformed Rule 22, as we did in '75, that would reduce the number of senators required for cloture from the present 60 to, say, somewhere between 58 and 55. There's no magic number. You will notice I do not want to get rid of the filibuster, but as I will argue, I think we need a different number. Then we tried to find a line that would assure deliberation and prevent debilitation. The number 60 worked for us then, but in this harshly partisan Senate of today, I believe it's a hill too high. However, it would worry me to reduce the cloture requirement all the way down to a simple majority and to end debate. It might be more efficient, but the Senate has a much higher calling. It must ventilate tough issues. It must protect the integrity of our courts. You must shape fundamental compromises reflecting our federal system. And at times, at great passion, you must help us find our way, lead us forward, and hold us together. I served in the Senate during most perilous times of executive abuse, when wars were begun and escalated, when funds were spent or withheld, when civil liberties and civil rights were under assault, all with little public awareness, no accountability to the legislative branch, and it was only when basically here in the Senate that senators stood up and used their special stature that we began to make a change. And that's why I don't want to get rid of the filibuster entirely. Ironically, however, the use of that right as now practiced threatens the credibility of the Senate and its procedures, and I think adds to the incivility that we discussed. The filibuster should not be used to frustrate the very purpose of the Senate procedures, to foster discussion, even extended discussion, to enhance public understanding. The constitutional authority to advise and consent found in the Senate of presidential nominations is one of the Senate's most important responsibility. Yet there can be no consent without debate, and there can be no debate if a minority of senators, even a single senator, can bar the Senate from giving its consent. Under the same constitutional provisions that give the Senate the power to change Rule 22 by majority vote, it can change its procedures for bringing nominations to the floor. The Senate's leadership should have the authority, sustained by a majority and a ruling of the presiding officer if necessary, to bring nominations to the Senate. In addition, the Senate's leadership has the ability to suspend, until a particular nomination has been resolved, the two-track system that has permitted filibusters in name, if not in fact. One of the things we did back in '75, in addition to reducing the number required for cloture, is we instituted the two-track system. So the old idea that if you wanted to filibuster, you had to get on the floor and make a spectacle of yourself. Mr. Smith goes to Washington, and the whole nation and the world could see what you were doing, had been substituted by a more subtle, silent filibuster, which allowed for more efficiency in getting the huge backlog of Senate business conducted, but it had a negative side effect because it reduced almost all public attention and public responsibility for instituting filibusters, and now the holds that, in my opinion, are based upon the filibuster. I'm going to submit the rest of my testimony for record, but let me just close with one statement. When the restored old Senate chambers were dedicated here some years ago, I think Howard Baker was selected to speak at those ceremonies for the Republicans, and Tom Eagleton was selected to speak for the Democrats. And he pointed out the unique and even sacred role that the Senate has in sustaining the values and the laws and the unity of our country. He said, "Here in this room has been sheltered the structural side of our democratic government for decades. The government's life force, what makes it work and endure, is our capacity to accommodate differences and to find a way beyond parochial, partisan, and ideological concerns to live together as a free nation." I think that's the Senate's unique and rare role. And that's why the work of this committee and the decisions of the Senate on how it will conduct itself are so crucial to our future. Thank you.